So, welcome back to TnT with Teresa Pilegaard and Tina Legno. We are going to talk about the role of the school horse in rider development. Tina and I both have varying degrees of school horses that we are able to utilize in our program to help riders find their own balance and to develop their skills. Um, and as we've chatted, we've been contemplating what that looks like in the greater horse world as the school horse becomes less available, and as many people move into horse ownership more quickly, and the impact that has both on the rider and the horse. So I'm going to pass it over to Tina, um, because she's had a lot of experience with helping horse owners work through problem behavior in horses, their own imbalances, and build a partnership together. What have you seen, Tina, as you have worked through that process with people about holes that maybe get that go unfilled when somebody jumps into horse ownership quicker, and maybe in an improportionate ratio to their skill set, versus staying in a program on school horses for longer until they're ready to jump into ownership?
Well, that's actually interesting because I'm in a situation right now with that. And what happens is if you, depending on the situation, a lot of times the owners are going to need more training from the trainer slash instructor because the horse is not necessarily, or the rider and the horse relationship are not necessarily educated enough to move through the stages of, beginner to intermediate to, more advanced. And a lot of times what you have is if the owner's not prepared to work with the horse where the horse is at, then the horse is going to regress back. And then, so then through the regression, then you have some problems that arise. And then, the trainer or the instructor has to step in so that it ends up making it a little bit of a longer process. So a lot of times when people go ahead and jump and buy a horse, if they haven't covered a lot of the bases down, then they're going to need to integrate more of a trainer involved in guiding them through the process with this horse, or you begin to run into walls because the horses are more educated or maybe not quite the right horse for the level of the rider. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that type of situation doesn't work out. It just means that you have to be willing to allow more guidance from an external source because a lot of problems happen with these types of situations. And then, you end up with this horse that gets a bad name because the owner doesn't really have the education. And then now said horse is bad because said owner doesn't really have the knowledge and the skills. And then they think that now it's time we are going to sell said horse because it's bad, when really the horse isn't being bad. It's only reflecting the knowledge of the owner. So a lot of that becomes a problem because now they're like, oh, well, we're going to sell said horse and buy a new one that may be a little more trained. But the problem begins as if they don't put the time in, then they're going to end up in the same space that they are with said horse, maybe a little bit different because the personality might be different or his balance issues may be different, but it's still going to be the same to some degree. So it's very important that, when people go to purchase a horse, that they've put in the time in understanding, the needs and have some skills underneath their belt. So,
Yeah. I love that you have focused in on the fact that it doesn't matter if the horse is highly educated. Because I think that is something we often hear is, okay, when you're ready to go buy a horse, go buy the educated horse to teach you. But
mhm.
then people do assume I don't need as much support because the horse is going to be my teacher.
Right. Well, and the trouble is, not to cut you off with that, is like there's always going to be a regress because of the horse matches the owner. So even though a horse is way up here and educated, yes, it will sustain to a certain point, but if the person doesn't climb the ladder and meet the horse where it's at, the horse is going to regress. There's no way about it. So, a lot of times what I'm finding in my later years is that I'm kind of at the point where if I invest in training a horse for somebody, they are going to have to put the time in and invest in following through, or else it's a waste of my time. Because I have put training in numerous horses that were not where the owners were to get them to a better place so the owners could then have them here. And the owners don't put the time in, and then all of a sudden the horse gets labeled or is not performing well because the owners didn't put the time in. So it's a lot of like wasted time for both the money of the owner and the horse if the owners aren't willing to kind of put the work in,
And I
and
think as professionals who have school horses, we have the responsibility of talking about what we have to do to
hmm
maintain those school horses. And
hmm
I've actually started, and I think I need to be a little bit more blunt than I have, to tell my riders what a privilege it is for them to come and sit on my horses. And I don't mean that in a cocky way. I mean it in a, this is a really honest, kind horse
hmm
that has been kept that way by me. I only teach 3 days a week, so my horses don't get burnt out on my horses.
hmm
But the other 3 out of the 7 days a week, I'm working with those horses
hmm
because they need to be rebalanced. They need to have a relationship with me. They need to feel seen. They need to feel safe
hmm
in their brains and in their bodies and find
hmm
the balance in all of those ways.
right.
And I don't think we talk enough about what maintaining the school horse looks like. So then people come, I've had people be like, oh, wow, your horse is so easy. You're so lucky. And I'm like, that was 3 years of my time and continued maintenance.
Right,
But
right,
people don't know. So I think
right.
we need to be more verbal in
Mhm.
what it looks like for those easy horses to
Right,
become and maintain and be happy in the job that they do.
right, right.
So what do we, as we have these beautiful horses in our barn that we're able to help riders learn from, what is our responsibility on both sides of the coin to our horse and to the rider so that they can get the education they need in order to be a good horse owner down the line when they're ready for that?
I mean, I feel that again, you can't make anybody do anything. You could bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, so to speak. But if you for me, my system was always maintain the balance of the horses, maintain the integrity of the work, maintain the horse's saneness, soundness, all of that, so that when the riders rode the horses were offering a safe place for them. They were sound, they were well balanced, they were well trained, and like you said, yes, you have to put in a lot of time. Like, I mean, one of my school horses I rode for holy moly, I got him when he was 5 years old and worked him for 12 years, basically 5, 6 days a week. And he was a school horse when he was 17. You know what I mean? And he was amazing till he was 27. But, the time and effort that went into that horse prior to that, and then maintaining. Fortunately, with him, I didn't have to maintain as much because it had been so long. But I also, when I taught, I was very, structured on how my riders sat and how things went. And most of my riders were on the lunge line. Rarely did most of my riders come off the lunge line. And that's a whole nother topic to be discussed, and we could go on and on and on about that. But I feel that if you offer a horse that has balance, that's very well balanced, that's very well behaved, then it gives the rider something to strive for. Whether they want it in the end or not, that's totally, we can't control that, but you can give them that foundation. And then, it hopefully they then realize that it's something that's achievable, that it could be achieved with most any horses. So then when they do get their own horse, they're striving to mimic that particular balance in those particular fields. Because again, like without those particular fields, you never know that they even exist. So a lot of it is offering that, but it's hard because again, people don't realize the time that goes into the work that they take for granted to a certain extent, and then when they buy the horse and it's nice for a little while and then all of a sudden the horse starts to fall apart. That's where it becomes a slippery slope because a lot of times people don't reach out, they don't lean on or contact or want to spend the money, and then next thing you know, 3 months have gone by and the horse is completely a nightmare to work with again. And then now they have double the work or triple the work that they had if they would have reached out, a little while ago. So back to kind of like the whole goal is to be able to set these bars. This is what the horse should feel like. And then these are the things that you can accomplish. And then when you buy your own horse, recognizing these things so that if it starts to falter or fall back, they reach out and learn that pick the signs up sooner than later. So, but again, it's we can't force them to do anything.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that because as I have thought about this, I've thought back through my years owning horses, and I've had many, many come through my barn. And how many horses have I had that are truly the beginner horse that everybody thinks exists? The one
Hmm.
that you could pull out of a field
Hmm.
months after never being touched, and it'll be
Yeah,
the same horse.
very rare.
I've had two,
Yeah, I've
and
had one. Well, one.
I believe it. And both of mine were in their 20s when they came
Yeah,
to me,
right,
right?
right. And
And
well, mine I had from when he was 5. You know what
okay,
I mean? So
yep.
it was like, and he came with problems. I sorted the problems out, and he trusted me with every ounce of his being. So, but that took 10 years for me as a rider to get to that point, and then from there it just stuck and resonated. And he then enjoyed his life. He loved to teach, he loved to do the job.
Mhm.
And but again, yeah, they're it's very rare and I could go on. I'll let you talk.
I agree. And I think that everybody believes that they can find that diamond in the rough or pay the big money to get the horse. And it's a disservice to the horse.
Well, and it's funny because I did a write up not too long ago. I had a client looking for a horse, and people would post that they were looking for a unicorn, and I'm like, she was getting frustrated, and I was like, yeah, I said unicorns are made. They're not bought.
Yeah.
You could go buy a horse that says it has all the bells and whistles and this and that and the other, but in the end, some might maintain it, but the percentages of the horses maintaining where they're at, the only reason why they're at is because of where the person was working them. And
Yes.
if you're not walking in the same shoes, doing the same thing, and who knows what they were doing to get the horse there, there's going to be some type of shift, and it's just the way it is.
Hmm. Well, and
I
I
mean,
like that you delved into the learning of feel because as professionals, we often have this divide about whether feel can be taught, which I am very firmly in the camp that feel can be taught. And if you can't teach feel, you've got to reevaluate your teaching. But most people are unaware of the depth of
right,
feel
right.
and how important it is when we put two bodies together
Hmm.
that we are going to disrupt the horse's natural rhythm, their natural balance, and that it is our responsibility to learn how to become balanced and feel in order to be respectful of the fact that this horse is carrying us.
Right,
And
right.
so the school horse is such a gem because they put up with a lot. But at
Hmm.
the same time, it's our responsibility. And as you said, another topic for another time, to talk about lunge line lessons, to take care of those horses by being a little stricter with what we allow in our
Hmm.
programs and
Right,
being very careful with how our horses are used. Um,
right.
and hopefully, then that Understanding translates when people get their own horses. But I think the interesting question here is how do we help people with that process, with starting on a school horse, learning from a school horse, and what the progression looks like if they eventually want to be horse owners?
I mean, the only thing that I can think of is that they just have to immerse themselves in a riding program where they are working up certain steps, and like your riding program where you are teaching people the very fundamentals. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm helping trainers and educators. I've done my time with the school horses and all of that, and that was a hard journey because everybody's so different, but I think that the only thing we could do is teach by example and maintain the integrity. And because I owned my horses and my school horses, there were very strong stipulations on, things that I would allow or not allow. And my horses, because I would always check in with my horses by one day I would school them and I would see, are they struggling with putting the bridle on? Or when I get on, are we struggling with walking a circle? Or, and then going in and fixing that. Um, Again, I think it's hard. I think one of the hardest things is for people, unless they walk the walk, it's really hard for them to understand. So all we can do is emphasize, and then it's a slippery slope because we don't want to discourage people either, because then we're gonna like discourage people to not own horses,
Yes,
which
exactly.
sometimes is not necessarily a bad thing, but
Yep.
but in but again, we all have to learn too. So it's like it's such a weird thing because, I learned my mistakes early on and made my mistakes. I'm sure my teachers were looking at me shaking their head like, "Holy smokes, what's this girl doing?"
Yeah.
So, I guess it's just everybody's kind of on their own journey. Alls we can do is teach by example. And if we see things, I feel like it's very important to call it out sooner than later. I would bite my tongue before. Now I don't, again, because I see things that could potentially be dangerous. So for the horse or the rider. So it's like, yeah, these things need to be called out. But I don't know. It's finding the special situations where the people are really committed to learning. And I guess, it's our duty to just show them the ropes the best as we can. And we know, again, when you own your own horses, you have a little more say in what's going on. So obviously, you create that structure. When they have their horse, you can do reflection on, do you remember when we had this horse, blah, blah, blah. And then this is a problem, or you need to go back to this. And again, if you teach the fundamentals, like leading and working in a stall and lunging, very basic lunging, and so that you give people guidelines so they at least are like have checkpoints when they're working their horses. So if all of a sudden the horse starts running off with them, you could be like, well, remember we did the work here in the stall and it did this and this. So but everybody, I think one of the hardest things too is people just want to get on and go, and that's not the way it's gonna work. And again, it might for some horses, but those are very rare. And again, like I don't know,
Well, I think
just
if we summarize what you said, we're looking at a redoing of the typical lesson program that we see, at least in our area
oh,
now, right?
listen, the
Horsemanship first.
yes, the lesson programs, I'm sorry to get on my soapbox right now, but the lesson programs that are out there are churn them and burn them.
Yeah.
They are burning horses out. They're putting people on unsound, unhappy, miserable horses that if people think that it's okay to fall off and break your arm, or for horses to bite you or try to kick you when you're attacking them up, this is the problem. So I
Mhm.
guess is as what we're trying to do is we're trying to educate people that those are not good things, and that's not even an option in there. So unfortunately, you have these larger corporations, these bigger stables that are just running through the program, and the horses are miserable. So I think one of the things is, if I rewind back, I think one of the biggest things is educating people on what a happy horse looks like.
I agree. And I think that's our responsibility. I always like to bring it back to what do I need to do better? What's my
Right.
responsibility to my clients? I think that it's easier for me to be very direct and kind, but direct when it's my horse because
Mm-hmm.
one, I know the horse really, really well. So they can give
Right.
me one little look and I know exactly what's going on. But
Right.
two, they're coming here using my horses. You have to go by my guidelines. I do
Right.
have full control over that horse.
Right.
So, like you said, if a horse is not wanting to bridle, we're stopping. We're
Yeah.
looking at the body language. We're looking
Right.
at the posture. We're feeling for where is this horse stuck? And I tell my clients, if your horse doesn't want to bridle, there's something wrong. You
Right. Right.
have to address that first.
Yeah.
But this is where people don't want to put that hard time in. People don't want tacking to be part of their lesson time because they think it's a waste of time. So that's
Wrong.
exactly that's something we have to be direct about with clients is
That's the
our
essential of
philosophy.
everything. That is your core.
Yes, agreed. It is a huge part of our philosophy. We need to have a strong philosophy. We need to communicate it from the get-go, and we
Yeah.
need to follow through. It's super easy to get a little tired and a little lazy and I have to kick my butt into gear sometimes and go, oh, nope, you're slipping up a little bit, Teresa. I know you're tired, but you need to go out. Last night, fifth horse of the day, I was like, do I really want to go do this at 8 o'clock? But I did because I knew my school horse needed it.
Right.
And it's really important for us to hold ourselves accountable, to have riding programs that are accountable for happy, healthy, sound horses, have strong philosophies, direct in our communication while still being kind with clients, so that
Right.
people can learn from school horses because the school
Right.
horses are going away because we're not doing all of those things, because they're working
Exactly.
out, because we are not maintaining them. And I'm saying we as an industry. Uh,
Right.
so if we want this legacy, this beautiful sport to continue, we have got to restructure. People have to learn from healthy, happy, sound lesson horses. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think public education is a huge part of that. But what
Mm-hmm.
you're doing with um, trainer education is huge to be able
Right.
to lift that side of the industry up. So if we can hit both sides of the coin, better
Yeah.
public education, better instructor education, then
Mm-hmm.
we're going to be able to improve the welfare of the horse.
Right. Right. And a deeper understanding of the when you understand the movement and the biomechanics of the horse, then it becomes a lot easier to call out all these other things going on and be able to remediate it before the horse is done.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and for anyone watching, Tina and I are doing a clinic at the end of the month for professionals. All the riding spots are full. It is subsidized through North Star, a 501(c)(3) that's dedicated to instructor continuing education. We are looking at adding another component open to the public. So check out both of our Facebook pages, Alivio and Dorado, to find all the information on that and tune in for our next episode.